A robber named Keith Ripley enters a building with a gun where Russian mafias were enjoying in the pool, among all escaping. He shoots a man. Later, he boards a metro train. Another robber, Martin Gabriel, known for diamond thefts, spots a man with cash and approaches him with a gun, taking the money from the man's briefcase. When two police officers arrive and see Martin with the gun, he runs towards the metro exit, realizing he can't wait for the train to stop because the police will be waiting. He jumps off just before it halts. While the other passengers disembark, the police search for Martin but can't find him. Ripley, who witnesses everything, knows where Martin has gone, but decides not to intervene and leaves. Meanwhile, the police review footage to track the robber's escape. They find a clip of Martin jumping from the train, but cannot identify him or gather further information. Martin then attempts to sell stolen diamonds. Just as he is about to finalize the deal, Ripley shows up, points a gun at him, and starts taking the diamonds.
I wouldn't take less than 100.
Martin suddenly takes Ripley's gun. They end up selling the diamonds and splitting the profits.
I have a proposition I wish to discuss with you.
After leaving, Ripley tells Martin he wants to talk. Suddenly, a car from a Russian gang pulls up, and they point a gun at Ripley. It becomes clear that Ripley owns a substantial debt to these gangsters, who threaten to kill him if he doesn't pay soon. Ripley hands over all his cash, and the gangsters drive away. Next, Ripley takes Martin to a pub to discuss his plan for one final heist, believing it will provide enough money to clear his debts and secure a comfortable life. Having seen Martin's resourcefulness during the metro incident, Ripley is confident that, with Martin's help, they can successfully execute the robbery. He commends Martin's clever escape, noting that such ingenuity is crucial for his plan. Martin responds by mentioning that he has always worked alone. Ripley explains that he once had a partner named Victor, whom he killed out of fear that Victor would betray him to the police. He offers Martin a chance to earn $20 million if he agrees to join the heist. Impressed by the potential reward, Martin decides to team up with Ripley. The next day, as Ripley finishes his preparations, Martin visits a shop and meets a girl named Alexandra. Their conversation reveals that Martin is starting to like her, and Alexandra responds positively. When Ripley arrives, it becomes clear that he knows Alexandra. She is Victor's daughter, though she is unaware of Ripley's history with Victor. After seeing Alexandra off, Ripley warns Martin to stay away from her, expressing his protectiveness and emphasizing that they need to focus on their work.
You were warned. Let's go.
Ripley then takes Martin to a Russian museum, filled with priceless stolen artifacts smuggled by the Russian Mafia. Although the NYPD is aware of the situation, they remain quiet due to the donations they receive. Ripley explains that everything in the museum is stolen, making it the perfect target for their heist. After leaving the museum, Ripley tells Martin that his motivation goes beyond money. He has a genuine passion for stealing and sees it as his calling. He gives Martin a coin to symbolize their partnership. With the coin in hand, Martin buys a bouquet and visits Alexandra, where they have a deep conversation. He invites her to meet at a club that night, but she declines. Undeterred, he insists on waiting for her there. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Weber speaks with a new recruit, Michael, who notes that the items stolen on the metro belong to the Russians. Weber shares his suspicions about Ripley, who is planning a significant heist with Martin. He reveals that he has been trying to catch Ripley for 22 years, but has always lacked sufficient evidence. Capturing Ripley has become his life's mission. Weber once arrested Ripley's partner, Victor, hoping for information, but Victor died before he could provide any. Now, Weber is determined to ensure Ripley is caught this time. On the other side, Martin is sitting alone in a club, waiting for Alexandra. When she arrives, they begin talking and soon start dancing together, intimates with her. After a while, they sit down and share stories about their families. Alexandra talks about her father, who has passed away, and believes he was killed by the Russian Mafia. She explains that her father had owed a significant amount of money to the Mafia, led by a man named Nicky, who is responsible for Victor's death, and now wants Ripley to repay all of Victor's debts. In the past, the Russian Mafia had approached Victor with an offer. If he stole a specific item from the museum, he could pay off all of his debts. However, when Victor learned what was being asked of him, he decided to go to the NYPD to become an informant and sought protection to keep himself safe. Unfortunately, the Russian Mafia found out and had Victor killed. After hearing this, Martin is surprised, but decides not to pursue the topic further, as it upsets Alexandra. They return home together and spend the night together. The next morning, after Alexandra leaves, Martin wakes up to find Ripley waiting for him. Ripley warns Martin again to stay away from Alexandra and tells him to prepare for their next job. Once ready, Ripley tells Martin about a big party at the museum that day, where they need to locate the hidden stolen items. To gain entry, they must disguise themselves as police officers. Ripley gives Martin a wireless camera
You drop him off.
and directs him to a tailor making police uniforms, instructing him to attach the camera to his button for recording. That evening, Ripley has prepared ID cards and police uniforms for both of them. They enter the museum and begin to explore, but are quickly noticed by Lieutenant Weber, who recognizes Ripley. Weber approaches and questions him, but Ripley mocks him and walks away, raising Weber's suspicions about Ripley's intentions. Meanwhile, Ripley activates his phone to see what Jacob, the tailor, is observing. Jacob's leading a group through the museum, and they discover that the stolen items are secured in a heavily protected safe with multiple doors.
I must stay healthy as well. At which point the sensors must be activated in reverse.
Martin doubts their chances of success without access to biometric security, but Ripley dismisses his concerns, confident that they will carry out the heist. Afterward, Ripley and Martin prepare to execute their plan. Martin distracts Jacob by spilling a drink on him so he can steal Jacob's belongings. As they leave, Weber watches them from a distance with his team, taking photos. He informs his superiors that he suspects Ripley is planning a theft, but the other officers are preoccupied with their current workload and reluctant to focus on a potential theft that may not happen. Meanwhile, Ripley and Martin concentrate on gathering the stolen items. Their first obstacle is a biometric lock that requires Zico's fingerprint. Martin cleverly decides to visit Zico's gym to obtain his fingerprint. The second lock is a voice recognition system belonging to a man named Sargi, and Martin plans to record Sargi's voice during their interactions. Then, they go to the subway canal and plan well.
What all to alarm you?
Afterward, Martin prepares lunch for Alexandra. When she arrives home, she is surprised to see him, and they grow closer and become intimate. Alexandra admits that she's starting to feel scared, recalling that both she and Victor were thieves, and worrying that Martin might meet a similar fate. Disturbed by her words, Martin discusses their situation with Ripley, who tells him that their only real threat is the Russian Mafia. They must steal the items quickly, or else the Mafia will come after them. Then Nicky, the leader of the Russian Mafia, who has kidnapped Alexandra, he confronts Ripley, stating that he no longer wants money. Instead, he demands the stolen items. When Ripley asks for his reasoning, Nicky explains that those items belong to his great-grandfather that were taken from the Kremlin, emphasizing that recovering the eggs is far more important to him than money. Hearing this, Martin grows anxious for Alexandra's safety. They proceed to the building next to the museum and begin breaking through the wall. The security staff hears the noise and assumes it must be underground maintenance. After breaking in, an alarm immediately sounds. A guard investigates, finds nothing, and turns off the alarm. As soon as the alarm is silenced, Martin confronts the guard with a gun and demands his access card. He instructs the guard to switch the cameras to show pornographic footage, causing confusion among the staff. The guard, trying to cover for the incident, claims it was just a prank. Meanwhile, Martin plays a previous recording on the CCTV to avoid suspicion. Then, they incapacitate the guard and head towards the safe. Ripley uses the guard's fingerprint on the scanner, while Martin runs the recording. They unlock the first door, revealing the safe, but come across laser beams that will trigger an alarm if disturbed. Martin crawls carefully towards the lasers and places a device to disable them, allowing them to reach the safe. They now need to crack the safe's lock, which will take some time. As they work, Weber realizes there was an alarm at the museum, leading him to suspect Ripley is stealing. He gathers his team and heads to the museum, just as Martin and Ripley open the safe. While Martin examines the contents, Ripley spots the eggs and picks up the box. When he turns around, he finds Martin pointing a gun at him. Martin demands the eggs and reveals he is an undercover agent sent by Weber. Ripley warns that if Martin arrests him, Alexandra's life is in danger. He urges Martin to take the eggs to Nikki, or Alexandra will be killed, as the door is about to close. Martin decides to leave Ripley for the police to capture, and takes off with the eggs to save Alexandra. When the police arrive, the guards sense something is wrong and begin to exit. Martin sees several guards ahead, points his gun at one, and runs for the back door. Meanwhile, Weber enters the museum with his team and encounters Ripley, as well as Sergei and Zico, who manage the museum. Ripley proposes a deal with them. At the same time, Martin delivers the eggs to Nikki and demands Alexandra's release. After getting the eggs, Nikki sits down with Martin and wants to show him the contents. When Nikki opens the box, Martin discovers the eggs are made of wood, not gold as he had expected, realizing they are worthless. The next day, Weber calls Martin to his office to inform him that Nikki has been captured. When Martin sees Nikki, he suddenly realizes this isn't the same person he had met before. Weber shows him photos, and Martin recognizes Nikki, only to learn from Weber that this is actually Victor, Ripley's presumed dead partner. This revelation helps Martin understand the entire situation. Ripley and Victor had been working together, and Victor faked his death, anticipating the arrival of an undercover cop. Ripley had manipulated Martin into stealing the eggs, and Victor was never dead. They had deceived him all along. Weber explains that they couldn't catch Ripley because the museum reported no theft. It turns out that when Sergei and Zico met with Ripley, he made a deal with them to conceal the illegal items in the safe. Since these were smuggled goods, any police involvement would implicate the entire museum. Ripley suggested they clean up the situation before the police arrived, and Sergei and Zico agreed not to report any theft. With no theft report, Martin's testimony loses significance. He realizes that Ripley had orchestrated a clever scheme with Victor, deceiving everyone, including himself. The most painful part for Martin is that Alexandra had also manipulated him, knowing that he would act out of love for her. Weber then informs Martin that a case against Ripley was filed, but dismissed by an attorney, who was revealed to be Alexandra. This revelation heightens Martin's anxiety. Later, Ripley prepares to sell the eggs. Before leaving, he calls Martin to say he always knew Martin was a cop. After their conversation, Martin returns to Miami and eventually comes back to New York, where he finds Alexandra. She tells him her love has always been genuine, and he admits his feelings as well. They decide to be together from that moment on. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.